So welcome to the living system and the logic machine, regeneration, care, and the future we're coding. I'm Tamara, and I chair AI for Human Flourishing, which is part of Harvard's Human Flourishing program. And flourishing through our lens looks a little bit different than it may through some other lenses. So flourishing through our lens includes, in the AI space, things like protection from harm, fair AI, and productivity, which are talked about a lot, but it also includes personal well-being, relationships and communication building, access to growth and development, and meaningful work, or that sense of I matter and what I do matters. So here's our animating question for this session specifically. AI for Human Flourishing doesn't work from net neutral. We work from net positive. So what we leave on the table when harm reduction is treated as the ceiling instead of the floor is what we're going to talk about today. And how do we keep in mind that human flourishing is not disconnected from planetary flourishing? And so I'm delighted to have with me three co-chairs of one of my IEEE subcommittees. And I'm going to invite Ada, Heather, and Caro to quickly do a one-sentence intro. I'm going to drop into the chat their LinkedIn so that you can get to know them and the face they put out to the world around the work they do. But in your one-sentence intro, I'm asking you to introduce what you can't stop thinking about right now. So, Caro, would you start for me?
Yeah, of course. And thanks so much, Tamara, but also everyone for having us here today. So my name is Caro Ames, and I've built a career around my passion for delivering sustainability outcomes globally. For the last 8 years, this has been in AI, across AI, sustainability, the planet, and critical national infrastructure. I think one thing that I can't stop thinking about right now is that the impact of AI on people and the planet is a choice. Like, AI is not one thing, and how we think about how we implement it, how we use it, does not necessarily mean exactly how it's currently being thought about. And that also applies for the critical infrastructure that also underpins our ability to leverage and use it. Thanks.
Thank you. That was beautiful and succinct. And so I'm going to ask the same thing to you, Heather. What is it that you can't stop thinking about right now?
Great. Thank you so much, Tamara, and thank you, everyone. So I'm Heather Wade, and I work and sit at the intersection really of data, analytics, AI, and trust. I do that through academic research, through the work I do, and through the boards I advise. And what I'm really stuck on and what I'm really thinking about at the moment is how the workplace is being reshaped by trust. So, whether that's positive trust in AI and systems, or whether there's some negativity in there, and how is that impacting how we're seeing our leadership, the teams that we work with, and our roles within that. I think it's a fascinating space, and I look forward to talking about it more.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, we talk a lot about leadership here, and we have a Flourishing for Leadership group as part of the Harvard Network. So, Ada, over to you with the same question.
Hello, everybody, and excuse my voice, it's a little croaky. So my name is Ada Parris, and I asked the question, what type of ancestor do you want to be? And actually, more recently, I asked the question, what type of ancestor do those decisions make us? And really what keeps me what's front of mind for me is I'm fascinated by maps. And so I'm working on a project called Cartography is Not Home. And what that means is that we're not in a technological crisis, we're in a listening crisis. We have forgotten to listen to ourselves, to our bodies, to the soil, to the earth. And so what becomes possible when we remember that intelligences, and I'm deliberate with the extra S, the plural, what becomes possible when we remember that intelligences are entangled and animate. Because if we think about maps, they've created boundaries, and those boundaries have created a value system of whose voice, whose intelligence, what is contained within that. And our AI, artificial intelligence, because we make assumptions when we say AI, we could be talking about ancestral intelligence. So artificial intelligence is amplifying the boundaries that the maps have created.
I really love what you're saying there. And I invite everybody to drop into the chat the different types of intelligences that you can come up with, because I'm always interested to learn from the brilliance that is in this room. And I see so many people who come from such different backgrounds that we want to honor all of your knowledge. So I want to start by thinking about design principles that might be requirements in order for humans to flourish on the other side of AI systems use. And so the question I'm going to put to you in the same order is, can you name a single design principle that you personally believe the field needs to adopt? And for the field right now, organizational use is kind of where we play with our group, but feel free to expand from that if your work touches on something beyond that. So actually, I'm going to reverse the order. Ada, can I start with you instead of ending with you this time?
Thank you. So continuing the threads that I started, the design principle. So when we design, I used to be really involved in human-centered design, and I've realized that that's wrong, because we're putting human flourishing before planetary flourishing. And actually, the design principle that I work with now is FPIC, Free, Prior, and Informed Consent Protocols of Indigenous Peoples. So many of the systems and the protocols and the frameworks that we use actually have Indigenous origins, but those Indigenous origins have been removed from these conversations. And so when we're designing, rather than using people as research subjects, I believe wholeheartedly that we should all be included in the design process, because if we design things from and we ask the questions and we create if we try to design from a top-down perspective, then we've already lost. We've already made some decisions, and our biases and our ways of seeing have come in. So in order to change things, we need to ensure that we have different perspectives, including Indigenous knowledge and wisdom systems. When we talk about reviews of papers, if we only focus on academic peer-reviewed papers, then of course we've already created a boundary. We've created a map around whose intelligence is valid and whose isn't. So I'm going to stop there because I think there'll be a beautiful conversation. So it's FPIC, Free, Prior, and Informed Consent Protocols of Indigenous Peoples.
I love that. And one question that we were asked to ask ourselves when we're thinking about, we often, from our own perspective, think that we're doing positive, but then we need to consider who we're putting in the shade. Before this conversation began, somebody talked about how your summer is going. And I always have this reminder, having worked in Australia, that when it's our summer, it's their winter. And so putting on that way of thinking around, yes, I might be building for the positive, but who might be in the shade, or what might I need to know in order to know who else's voice is being included? And I've learned so much from you, Ada, about who else we can center historically in our perspectives. So I'm going
to share a reference.
Yes.
There's a great book, fascinating, called Whose Global Village? Because when we say we, already we've created a boundary around who we're talking about, and the language of global north, global south is problematic. So when we're talking about these things and creating it and designing, we also need to think about who we mean by we.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you, because I've heard and I've stopped using global north and global south. Do you have something that you would say that you would encourage us all to use instead?
Global majority and global minority.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to grab onto that. And I did pop the name of the book into the chat as well. So Heather, I'm going to ask you the same question. around, we're going back to that, what are we designing for, and what needs to happen in the way we design.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I think some of the things that Ada was talking about, I want to pick up on. And Tamara, I think you sort of beautifully foreshadowed some of the things that I've been thinking about. And I've been thinking about how to think about this practically in the world of work. And I would like to propose a design principle around power mapping. So, being able to understand if you are launching using a system, something with AI in it, if you are bringing in new tools, etc., I would want to know who was involved in the designing of that, whose voice, who held the pen, as it were, when this was being designed, who is being heard and who is not. So it does go back to that point of who is not at the table, who has not got a voice. My belief, if a company or people designing a system cannot understand that or say that or talk about that really logically, why should you be able to ship that? Because if you think about it, there will be people who will be, say, monitored or surveilled. I don't love that language, but it is true, or evaluated using a system. And they are not the people that built this. They are not the people who understand how this is working and what the impacts are, right? They do not necessarily get the benefits out of that. This is captured at different levels, probably at way more senior levels. I also believe that things like this are really adding to some of the backlash that we're starting to see, some of the pushback. And I think that we need to step back and really think about that principle and think about the people that are really involved. I would love to see this. I would love to ask who doesn't have a seat at the table when a system gets built and what changes when they do. And we shouldn't be afraid of that conversation.
So I really love that direction of thinking. And a question that I have that goes deeper for me, because I was on a call the other day with Ron, who's in the room, and we were noting that there were 5 people who kind of looked the same in the room being asked to present to
Hmm.
a very global culture. And so I get very stuck in the tokenism versus actual contribution. And so how do we, when we can live in places that are surrounded by a singular perspective, make sure we're not tipping to just having tokenism so that we look like we've represented better? Do you have some suggestions there?
Yeah. I mean, there is no one easy way to do it, unfortunately. I wish there were, but there isn't. I think it goes back to really thinking about those very, very initial principles of why are you building something? Who is the team? And being able to look at this at the beginning, right? And think about how can I, or what I am designing or what I'm building, really build trust in the end users, right? Not just what can I get from this, what value can I create, et cetera, but how can I really build trust? Because that is the gap at the moment, right, between the fear and the trust. And the adoption gaps and lags are what's sitting in the middle of that. And that is what's being impacted. So I think it goes right back to initial founders and initial builders who need to question themselves. They need to be asked this. Their mentors, their supporters, their investors, if I think about this really practically, need to be asking those questions. And I mean, I'll say it. Why should you get funding if you cannot prove that what you are building and producing will meet the needs and be able to talk to everybody who could be using it and that you are able to clearly state that?
That is the future I hope we're building together. And I imagine anybody who's joining this room is part of the us that think that way. And later on, I'm going to ask us to extend our thinking and figure out a little bit how we can pull others who maybe are very much money-centered, capitalistic, or feeling a scarcity mindset, how they can also participate. So that's going to come later. But I want to take the same question back over to Caro. So again, for those of you who just joined, what I'm asking everyone to chime in based on the lens that they bring is, what is a design principle that they believe this field needs to adopt? So Caro, over to you.
Well, it's funny that we should have ended Heather's point on what we just said, because actually my number one design principle is being really clear on what the problem you're trying to solve is and what the goal or the outcome you're trying to achieve is, and making sure that's the forefront of every decision that you make. And that starts even in its first lens with, is AI even the right solution to this problem? Because I have a background in consulting for people who are on the call, and I actually have spent quite a lot of my life telling people that AI is actually not the solution to their problem, and there are more effective, more efficient ways of trying to solve what they're trying to solve. And even if AI is the answer, this then comes down to what type of AI, because we automatically now, particularly given AIs and Gen AIs and LLMs prevalence in the media, etc., jump to that. But again, there are significantly more effective, both in terms of the outcomes that they deliver and the specificity of these kind of algorithms, but also the efficiencies and the impacts that that has on underlying challenges around like critical national infrastructure. And so ultimately, always for me, it's about starting with actually the problem and then across the whole process, whether you're designing and building from scratch, whether you're thinking about designing a procurement to procure a specific product and tool. It's about having that accountability in those questions that go also not just with the people and the impact it has on people, but also thinking more broadly as well around the impact of the planet and making sure that you're delivering a solution that achieves what you're trying to achieve as a business, but also delivers a net positive outcome on the people and the planet that sits around it.
I love that net positive idea. And I'm popping into the chat this place I want to get back to, which is from the perspective of whoever you are in the room. If you could only have one word to describe what you think is missing from how we build or deploy AI systems, could you come up with a one word answer for that? So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is heart. And I like, Karina, you've got empathy in there. What about you, Caro? Would you have a one word for that?
Is systems thinking one word? We
We'll
hyphenate
make it, it's got a hyphen. We'll allow it as one word. How about you, Ada? Can you come up with a single word?
Yeah, my word is pause.
Mm.
We've got to a place where it's answers as a service. We're rushing through LLMs, large language models. Everything is bigger, faster. And, at the same time, this rush for bigger, faster is decimating the planet. And so I invite a pause, because just because we can, does it mean we should?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a beautiful, beautiful thought. Heather, can you do a single word for this?
Yeah, I'm going to say that where I think we're at now, the word is power and it's being misused. Where I would like it to be is that the word is trust and that we all, can actually have trust in what's being created. But I think we are a million miles away from that at present. Sorry, I do, but
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Actually,
yeah.
people who have your cameras on, if we're there at the top of your screen and we're really not there at the bottom of your screen, do a little physical demonstration of where you think we are right now. I'm probably about here up to my chin. Yeah, no, nobody's got their hands waved up way high in the air
No,
yet. Let's do
no.
the yet. I do love the words that I'm seeing added: love, agency, insight, human connection. Wendy, edge use cases. You are doing the dash dash dash, but can you explain what you mean by that?
It's kind of, in my mind, a lot of those things tied together: love, empathy, insight. It's thinking of the people that are not always thought about, the situations and the contexts and the environments that are not always thought about.
Thank you for sharing. I really like that perspective. I'm gonna have each of our guests answer one more question before we go to a breakout. I know part of the magic in these sessions is us all talking to one another, but I am wondering, because I'm someone who needs concrete examples to think of things, and I didn't tell the three of you that I was going to ask you this, but I'm wondering if you can think of an example of a product or deployment of product that has really gotten it right. Some place that you see doing things the way you wish they were done. And as I look on my screen, I saw all three of you looking up in the corner, which is either the universal signal for don't pick me or deep thinking.
Or both, actually.
It's the looking for inspiration, isn't it?
Absolutely. So would any of you like to volunteer to go first? I'm not gonna, and you don't all have to go. Maybe you don't have one, but
Do you mean like an AI system that you think has got a good deployment or anything?
it could be that, or it could be something deployed well. So I'll give you an example of a company that I think is doing well. Dove, their campaign for real women has actually decided to never use AI on a picture, and they've actually created a whole place where people who do prompt AI images can go and learn how to prompt to get truly representational images of beauty of all sorts of women. And so I think that is a beautiful use case of a company saying, we're not going to judge you if you use it. We're going to tell you how we suggest you use it well. And we're actually going to make a pledge to not use it. And so I think that's an example of a company doing it really well.
So no, that's great. So I will happily go, and I love the people that are saying Patagonia as well because I do think
Yes.
that's a fabulous example. I'll give a slightly different example of something. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and obviously at the moment there's a lot around. Okay, are people using voice generate, AI voice generation to, I don't know, whatever they want to do it for, make it easier, etc., etc. So this isn't a company necessarily. What I'm going to say is, I really appreciate when I'm listening to something, if it tells me, okay, this was made with zero AI systems, no voice generation, it never will be, we, validate humans, etc. And again, it gives a choice, right? I can go with this view because they're telling me this. They're not judging. They're just saying, well, this is what we do. And if I choose to then not listen to something else that I think has used that, and that's not the route I want to go down, then I can do that, and that's making it clearer for me. So I think that in media overall, there is a trend towards showing where you've used humans and that humans have developed these ideas, and I love that. I know that's not one company or one product, but it's a theme that I'm really enjoying at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. Caro or Ada, do either of you have something to add there?
I mean, Heather shared a slightly different angle on what I was going to talk about, but I will talk about it because I think it is important. So, I've been involved a lot recently in the concept of procurement and how do we design procurement in a way that both enables the development of robust, resilient AI systems that have a positive impact, but also ensures the robustness of the procurement process. Because obviously, with the availability of Gen AI tools, many organizations are, leveraging them in order to produce material, etc. And I think one thing that makes me feel positive is that definitely in that second space, there is, particularly in like the public sector, at least in the UK where I'm based, a requirement to disclose if you've used AI and how you've used AI and which capabilities and products that you've used, which I think is a really good stepping stone. And then in terms of the future looking piece, we're working on some policy around actually how do we support organizations in also asking the right questions around actually how do you design and build this system in a way that actually mitigates for some of these risks. And I know it's very similar to what Heather said, but I think a lot of people here, if you're in the process of implementing or thinking about it, I think that that's a really important thing to keep in the back of your mind, whether or not you're trying to procure a tool or you're thinking about going to market in the future as well. So I think that's a positive shift in the market. I think it's going to take a long time for it to really be there at scale. But for me, I think it's a positive first step.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Caro. And Ada, do you have one to add?
I've got two, if that's okay.
It is okay.
One is there was a recent announcement about Patreon. So the founder of Patreon has said that has blocked Patreon AI crawlers from scraping Patreon for content, which means that which is a huge issue at the moment. I've seen it blow up everywhere. So that's one use, and that's for some that may seem anti-AI, but I don't see it as that. I think it's good governance, which is really important. And the other is that it's about educational models. So I'm connected to three universities that are interdisciplinary. So Arts University Plymouth is a fully interdisciplinary school, London Interdisciplinary School, and the School of Communication Arts. And what I love about all three is that art and storytelling is as important as the discussions around the ethics of artificial intelligence, because the artists are the storytellers, and so understanding the nuances of what is happening. I really feel that it's important to. I mean, I'm a big advocate for having artists in residence on the board of organizations, not to create beautiful works of art, but also to bring in the nuances of storytelling. And I feel that that in itself helps you to understand, to bring in the AI stuff, to understand the. I'm an artist as well. And one of the things I say about my role as an artist is to create moments of pause. So even if you look at one of my works of art and you go, I don't like it, you've had to pause to slow down and you have an emotional response to it. You have a somatic response to it. And that in itself is something to be explored.
In Australia, Ada, we used to call that having a think. And I think any time we can put more space between stimulus and response to have a think or insert our belief, the better we become, the less reactive we become, the more we can perhaps perspective take a little bit better.
Also, I'll do ours real quick.
Thank you.
I think that we had an affinity for thinking about who's not in the room. The have a think pause really landed well with everyone. And then we had an interesting conversation about biotech, and the role that that's going to play in all of this as well. So really, really interesting breakout room.
And I think that brings up something really important, that we often talk about AI systems, but we're mostly talking about generative AI. And if we can be more into that, how else might we be thinking? I see some comments in the chat from Nora and Jeff, but maybe we could hear what happened in that room, because I'm getting hints of it in the chat, but not getting any of the main meal. So would one of you share what happened in your breakout?
But I was trying to ask Jeffrey to come back and reiterate what he was saying, because he also got cut off at the end of what he was saying. So I feel like, unless he doesn't want to, so I don't want to put you on the spotlight.
No, it was a beautiful conversation. It just kind of led directly into kind of, we talked about taking the pause and then the bigness of trying to look out for getting the right stakeholders in the room, and how that could, how huge that is. We talk about how it could break, right? How could you break something by trying to look out for everyone? And then we talked about, well, we don't have to think about it in terms of it being specifically a one size fits all. Everyone, it's more about understanding its purpose and understanding the purpose of the each individual tools and how those tools can help globally, which makes it larger, right? It makes it a larger issue, or makes it more easy to break. But if you consider the purpose and ensure that we're not giving up a huge part of our own human agency in the process, that we think about it from a service perspective, that's kind of what I was getting at the end. So, and please chime in. And
I was actually just going to ask Heather, Caro,
mix.
and Ada if any of them wanted to build on that, because I think that is a beautiful place to extend our thinking a bit.
I can come in quickly. So one of the things, as Jeffrey was saying, that we were talking about, which is it can be such a huge thing to think about everybody and making sure that we include everybody and consider everybody and consider every impact, which is obviously like why I think the purpose point is really important, because I think if you're really clear on the purpose of what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, then actually understanding the stakeholders, the impacts become significantly easier. And I actually think, particularly in the West, well, yeah, okay, in sort of the way in which it's like AI has been thought about in terms of bigger, better, faster, stronger, the purpose of it has been completely lost in many respects. And actually, I think for me, there's two things there. It first of all makes addressing some of the fundamental underlying challenges much harder because it's everything, not a group of things that are trying to achieve something. And then, like, ultimately, in the other direction as well, we're not seeing necessarily a lot of as much positive value from it as we could be, but we are beginning to see the negative impacts of not thinking about the bigger picture in the way in which it's been implemented. That's just.
And I'm going to
Go ahead.
jump in on some of that, if that's okay. And then I want to circle back at the end, Tamara, and talk about the point that you and I were just chatting about when everyone came back. So I think building on this, Caro, I also have a view that if you are clear in what you're building and you are building it for a segment of people, I don't have a fundamental problem with that. What I have a problem with is if you don't realize that you've just built something for a certain segment of people and you've got no idea that that's what you've done because you've never thought about anything else or any way of looking at things. I've worked in analytics. I know the power of looking at customer personas and thinking about who you are doing something for. Like I said, that's okay. But it's the not knowing and the not thinking that to me is the absolutely massive problem.
I think it's also the not caring and not having the accountability there as
That's
well.
it. Yes. Yes. Like you've never thought about it. And even if someone brings it up, you just clearly don't care because you're just going down a certain path. That's what we cannot have any more of.
I think this comes to a real leadership challenge because I'm hearing from many of the large teams that I work with that they're feeling this, okay, we've spent on this and it's not making impact. So rather than pausing, which is my big thing I'm taking away from today, a lot of them are rushing. And so I hear them telling people, you've got to deploy, you've got to produce, and that anxiety, that push is exactly what's shutting down what humans do well. And so I really think about the role of leaders here. Ada, yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in there because you actually started to touch on something that a takeaway from our group is that what we haven't mentioned here is the impact of mental health and well-being. So I'm the chair of a mental health organization. We have Mental Health First Aid England. We have over 120,000 members. We have trained over 1 million people to be mental health and suicide first aiders. And in our group, something that I, on the reflection, is thinking about the impact that AI has on the mental health and well-being of the user and on the people developing it and on the leadership, because leaders now are in this position where you're supposed to have all the answers and you're supposed to be on top of the latest AI developments and you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to be responsible for the mental health and well-being of your teams and your families. That's a lot. That is a lot. So where is the place, where are the spaces for you to be able to go, I don't know, and I need to think about this, and also to think about when I'm building, one of the reasons I asked the what type of ancestor do you want to be question is because whether you are conscious of it or not, when you design something, you are leaving a fragment of yourself within that, and that creates an echo. And as leaders, especially in this current climate, what I'm working with organizations, when I'm coaching, one of the things I say is what we need more of now is not leaders who know how to navigate. We need leaders who know how to make space for emergence, who know how to step back and go, we're going to lead from behind by creating the spaces for others to grow, to flourish, because my leadership look, when I started at MHFA England, the first thing I said to my CEO is my role is to see you out of here. And he was like, what? And I went, it's not for you to leave, but it's for us to co-create an organization that will live past you. So that if you're ideal next role comes up, you will not feel any way to come to me and say to me that I'm going to leave. Because what we've done is we have created an organization that is in that 7 generations. Somebody once said, if your life's work can be created in your lifetime, you're thinking too small. And as leaders, that's the thing, that your leadership is not just about you, it's about the impact that you have on others. And in order to think about the impact you have on others, sometimes we need to step back and go, it's not about me. It's not about me getting to the board. It's not about those things. It's about how am I helping others to flourish, especially in this hyper digital, very complex world.
That is a beautiful question for us to sit with. And one of the things that I used to say when I worked almost exclusively in the well-being space was, if I do my job right, I'm going to put myself out of work, because people will now have the skills they need and they won't need me to come in and fix this for them. And I think one of the challenges in the way that we build business is that we need it to keep going. And so people are not building businesses in such a way that they're not needed anymore. And I think very specifically about that when we talk about fair AI or responsible AI or human-centric AI, that once everybody's doing that, there's a fear that there won't be all of this work for all of us. And I think that's a mindset change. I often talk about a skill set and a mindset.
Yeah. When I'm working with my board, one of the things I always say is, if we get to a place where my skills are not what we need to move forward, then I will step aside. We have to look at, and I'm not afraid to step aside. We look at what is needed to get us to the next 6 months or the next year or the next 5 years. And if that's not the skills that I have, I need to go. And I can't be afraid to say that, to let that happen. But what I can do is I can help the organization shape who comes next.
That concept of being able to understand that everything has a season, everything comes to an end, and being comfortable with this. It reminds me of the circle of life, that the only thing we know is that none of us are getting out alive, and yet most of us spend a large portion of our lives in fear. And how would it look if we overlaid that idea onto the way we build and the way we deploy? I want to leave some time for questions from anyone who is listening in the room. So feel free to raise a hand if you have a question, or pop a question into the chat for the rest of our time together. And then in the meantime, while you're thinking of what your questions might be, I'm going to ask, this time starting with Heather. Number one, where should people go to stay connected with you? Was there anything I didn't ask you that you really wanted to talk about? And maybe what's an aha moment that you're taking away today? So Heather, you first, please.
Brilliant. Best way to get hold of me is LinkedIn. It's just Dr. Heather Wade on LinkedIn. I believe Tamara's put our links. Please connect. I would love to speak to you all more. I have so many things I'm taking away. I am actually going to pick up, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. I'm going to pick up on one of the comments in the chat, which I absolutely loved, which was from Ron, which was about the authenticity premiums that are coming in. I think it came from the comments around, where people are being really honest about what they're doing and not. And I am actually, and there's a comment there about what we're all really excited about. So actually, that's one thing I am really excited about. I am really excited about all of us going, wait, no, I don't like these things, and I'm going to step into a more authentic way of doing things, of living my life, of leading, and I think that will be more and more of a premium that people can get really excited about and get behind. I'm going to spend some time more thinking about that as well, and thinking about how I can maybe research around that a little bit. So in the interest of time, I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have all three been so aware of our timing, and I deeply appreciate that. I'm going to pass the same question over to you, Caro, but I am going to add on Karina's bonus of what you're most excited about. So we're looking at where we can connect with you, what you're taking away, how we can stay connected with your work, and what you're most excited about. That's a lot.
Yeah, I know. My ADHD brain is going to really try and remember that. I tried to write it down, but we will see. In terms of connecting with me, LinkedIn is always the best. So please, yeah, as Heather said, feel free to reach out. I think in terms of takeaway, so I have a tendency to go full front, all steam, all at once, all the time, and then remember that I really need to pause. And actually, being friends with Ada has been really great for me in the last 9 months because she's a very good, consistent reminder of take a step back and pause. But that has reminded me that I need to do that about some things in my life. And I think, actually, that's a consistent reminder that we all need, no matter what types of roles we have, what types of like environments we're working in. It can be very hard when you're in the depths of things in the day to day and with stressful. We've talked a lot about short-term priorities, more, more, more. So taking that time to pause, I think, for me is really important. I think one of the things that I think I am really excited about right now is I've been thinking about the kind of whole systems level impacts of AI across people and the planet, whether or not that's from a digital impact or whether that's from a physical infrastructure impact side for quite some time. And I think whilst I think maybe the narrative is not generally very positive, what I am excited about is that people are talking about this now. This is something that people are talking about. And in order for us to drive change, the first step that needs to happen in that journey is awareness, right? And so for me, I feel like the fact that this is in the mainstream media, the fact that experts globally are engaging in it, whether it's through this or whether it's through, the host of other initiatives, is a really positive step in the right direction.
And baby steps in the right direction still get us there. I think often we think we have to have a big swing. For me, a baby step lately has simply been asking myself, do you need to ask this of Claude? Or could you find this answer another way? Because I'm trying to be more aware of the impact on our environment. And we didn't spend a lot of time today talking about the planet.
Well, yeah, very happy to talk about that in the future with anyone else who wants to reach out, though, because that is really my thing. But I
Well, and
completely
you know what? We have time. Can you give us a little insight into how you're currently thinking about the environmental impact? Because it is not my area of expertise, and I would love to learn from you. And we do have time right now.
So I think really quickly, one of the big observations that I've had in the way in which this has currently been tackled by particularly the kind of AI side of the industry has been technical AI people often trying to essentially back engineer to understand actually what the environmental impacts of AI are. Now, if we think about AI more broadly, there is a huge physical infrastructure component that underpins this, right? And coming back to the choice point that I made at the start, it's not that we can't design data centers in a way that do not have a hugely significant negative impact on the planet. It's just currently no one is making the choice in 99 times out of 10 at the moment to do the right thing. And so one of the things that I would like people to think about, one of the things I've been working from a like policy perspective of in the UK is how do we create forcing mechanisms that don't just come through regulation? And so for me, that's around procurement and it's around decision making and how you think about what you're using. Do you understand actually where this is coming from in terms of a physical infrastructure, what decisions that company has made? And in terms of like procurement and accountability, how can you ask the questions? How can we get the data? And how can we try and shift this change from a business perspective rather than waiting for regulation, which I think probably won't catch up? There's a key point that I think was
I think
missed.
Scott Galloway had a resist and unsubscribe movement that was highly impactful. And we have the power as people purchasing things or leaders choosing things to actually make a difference. Ada, I want to not miss out on hearing where you are, how we can stay connected besides LinkedIn, which I have dropped in, and what you're excited about.
Quickly, just on the AI thing, so on the planet thing. So one of the existential questions that I have been grappling with is knowing the impact that AI has on the planet, on mental health, on well-being, on users. Can I claim to be a climate activist and use social media? because every like that I ask for is undoing everything I stand for. Social media is here. And so what that's meant is I've had to design my own um, strategy for using social media in a way that reminds myself that that is my issue. So that's one. The other with the planet is about the conversations around the ethics of AI. Most of those are still based on capitalism, on somebody else getting rich. And so we have to have different conversations about the ethics of AI that include the planetary flourishing, which is the work that Caro and Heather are doing. My takeaways, which I'm going to wrap up into also the thing that I'm really happy about, is that I'm happy for this conversation. 12 years ago, I used to work at London Business School as part of the MBA program, putting together the packs, working on that. We didn't have these types of conversations, not at all. And so I'm really happy that we're having these conversations where people are focused on moving from doing to being. And that's really, really powerful. And never forget that that's the kind of conversations that we're having now, because as long as we have that, that's centered on that understanding who we are. You know, I think in my group I mentioned somatic AI. One of the workshops and the things that I'm doing is this understanding of when you ask an AI a question, pause and before you look at the answer, before you really dive into the answer, just focus on how did that answer make you feel? Where in your body did you feel it? And why did you have that response? Because then that helps to guide you to the next question. So for me, this whole thing is really moving from doing to being. So thank you.
Thank you so much to Heather, Caro, Ada, and everyone who joined us today. This space would not be so energetic without all of you, and whether you've spoken aloud or in the comments or really been processing, thank you for coming. We hope you'll join us again. The recording will be available. I will post that to the AI for Human Flourishing website. And I will also be doing a little bit of summary here and there on LinkedIn. And like you, Ada, I'm constantly in a struggle with what is this social media presence doing to my mental health, but how else do I connect with the other humans? And so maybe that's a conversation for another day. Thank you so much, everyone. And remember, together we can shape AI for the good of all. And it's conversations like this that are going to tip it in the right direction. So thank you so much for joining.